around no 2.5 for speed.
Let's get there. It is in the center of the racetrack. We've got the Adult Street flying alongside again.
More Emblem is still there. More Emblem is pulling away. He's got another gear. Yeah, the quick fight coming to Derby. Wheel away. He's flying hot. It's all hot. Smarty Jones is all out. And here's the first undefeated winner of the Kentucky Derby. It's the outlaw that beats the Missouri Cup.
The press have been run, the horses have arrived, the field has been drawn for Kentucky Derby 144, presented by Woodford Reserve, and it's time for the Kentucky Derby Workshop presented by Inspires.com. Let's take a look at the headlines coming into today, Wednesday of Kentucky Derby Week. The Derby favorites, at least on the morning line, Justified draws post position number 7 of 20. Tough post for Magnum Moon and Noble Indy. Two of the four top Fletcher trained horses draw 16 and 19 respectively. And Mendelssohn, who drew post position number 14 in quarantine. Still, we're going to see him for the first time on the track tomorrow morning here under the Twin Spires. And we are joined by a special guest here, Bob Edwards of E5 Racing and Good Magic. And Bob, exciting, times for you, starting way back as a 2-year-old last year. Thanks for joining us. How are you enjoying your Derby week so far?
Having a great week so far. Hospitality's been phenomenal. We have a driver, which is killer for us kind of getting around, and navigating through here. And in the mornings, as you guys know, are special.
Ed DeRosa joining us as well. And let's take a look at the Derby field. We kind of alluded to the draw yesterday. I want to get Bob's thoughts on the draw, your draw, everybody else's draw. And a good sign for you was your draw and Bolt d'Or's draw, because it's exactly the same as the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and you won that race over Bolt.
We know that early. As soon as it came on, it was something that my partner Barbara saw and picked up on quickly. And, we're hoping for magic again.
Well, for those not lucky enough to have a driver, want to quickly point out KentuckyDerbyParking.com is the place to go for all that info. But you will be chauffeured in here on Derby Day. I'm sure you're hoping Good Magic. It's a good trip, as he did in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Really a meteoric rise for E5, winning the Breeders' Cup here. You also have Rushing Fall, who we'll see on Oaks or Derby Day. But talk about his progression. Favorite in his maiden, favorite in the Champagne. Long shot here. He finally gets it done.
Just beautiful. TV's coming up. So, I guess starting with the Fountain of Youth, for us it was a prep race, and being a new guy in the business, to me it's a prep race, right? We're preparing the horse to kind of peak like this Saturday. So he had 6 extra pounds. He had about a 40-plus day layup. We went to Stone Street, to where he went and kind of was a horse for a while, gained some weight, went back to Chad, probably missed a few breezes, just time to getting things in and getting things in order. Went to the Fountain Youth, had a really good blow. We were really happy, and then people were kind of down on the horse. He had 6 extra pounds. It was 1-2, 1-2 all season at Gulfstream, speed favoring track, and we felt the horse performed really well.
I wasn't down on him.
No, I'm not picking on you.
I meant, but a lot of people
I
were.
was. I'll admit it. I thought, here's a race. I thought Strike Power was a horse he would get by, and I think we're going to see a clip from the Fountain of Youth, and we'll see that here. But I've come around to him. We'll see his later race in a bit, the Bluegrass. But here is that Fountain of Youth, and it sounds like, based on what Chad was telling you, the horse was training. Not unexpected, this performance.
No, not unexpected. I think Chad thought maybe we could win. But he did have 6 extra pounds on him,
right,
and it was a speed favoring track, and it's been 1-2, 1-2 all season down Gulfstream, and we just kind of wanted to set up. We wanted to get some points. Jose did a phenomenal job keeping him in the points, and just ready to go from there. And I remember Chad asking Jose, do you think you can get the distance? He said, absolutely, boss.
So then after this third place performance, and right here it's promises fulfilled, and then it was Strike Power, and you guys were in third. Like you said, you got coveted Kentucky Derby points, but then the Bluegrass comes around, and we need to get this horse back on the winning track. You need to get those competitive juices flowing, and let's talk about the Bluegrass Stakes, where it's a workmanlike performance, and he gets it done, Bob.
Training up to the Bluegrass, he just kept getting better and better. He loves training. He's kind of that kind of horse. He is a workman style horse. Went to the Bluegrass, full field, I mean, that's a premium prep race. We had a full field of horses, no excuses going in. He was training well. You know, we had a good post position. We felt that, you know, he was going to peak, you know, not peak, but at least perform as expected, and he did, and he delivered.
Now, in the Fountain of Youth, we saw him tracking those 1-2 horses all the way around. Also, somewhat close in the Bluegrass. Came from a little further off in the Breeders' Cup. If you talked with Chad, has he said anything about what he's talking about with Jose for the Derby, where you expect him to be in that first turn, and then the move you want to see him make in the far turn?
Have you met Chad?
I have.
No, just kidding. You know, I know they discussed kind of a little bit of strategy, and obviously we have some speed. There's some speed that we can kind of hopefully chase and go behind a little bit and tuck in and wait for that perfect time and let Jose use the internal clock and, you know, push the button when he needs to.
Yeah, Chad, Cornell graduate, so yeah, I'm sure we'll be well prepared and researched for this day.
Let's rewind a little bit. How did you get involved in horse racing? As Ed mentioned, a rapid ascent. You've had a lot of success in a short amount of time, but how did you get interested in racing, and how did you get lured into buying your first horse to get you to the point where you are now?
So my wife's from Saratoga. She was at Pinkerton, which you probably hate if she's watching this. She worked at Mexican Connection. You know, so we have roots in New York. We went up to Saratoga for a family reunion, and we just kind of went to see an old business partner's house. It was on Fifth Ave, and he took my daughter and I, my oldest daughter Cassidy, to the backside, which we never had. And as you guys know, that's the hook. I mean, you start going on, you start loving on horses, and then sucker punched me and rolled me right into an auction. You know, and unexpectedly.
Just like you drew it up.
And I got to sit down with Mike Ryan, Niall Brennan, Scott Pierce, who does all my betting, and just kind of walked around Mike all day. Didn't know me from nothing. You know, I had dirty cargo shorts on, a ball cap, flip flops. You know, not horseman's attire at all. And he spent the whole day with my daughter and I going through confirmation, kind of, you know, what to look at, what to not, you know, what you wanted to look at, what you don't want to see, and we ended up going back to a wedding, and Mike called me and said, all right, the horse is in the ring. I had to duck out of a wedding, and I bid on the phone, and we bought our first horse, which we thought we were going to, you know, run in Saratoga that next summer, who ended up getting claimed last week by Linda Rice. But it was, you know, a great start, and my wife, you know, felt it was a huge conspiracy that we were going to load up on horses and be cool more. And, you know, 80 horses later, you know, we actually loaded up on horses, but I swear it wasn't a conspiracy. Just kind of, we went into the breeding aspect of it to kind of get vertical, to have horses to sell, horses to breed to race. And, you know, like I said, we got really lucky early. New Money Honey, Zendaya. Zendaya was my first. We bought her as a racing prospect. Gave her to Chad. We lost in the license fee. The Lady Shipman was really fast. And then we went to the Intercontinental 1. So my first win was a stakes race. And then from there, I think I won 4 or 5 more stakes races in a row, just without breaking a maiden, and then rolled into the Breeders' Cup. And New Money Honey performed phenomenal under Javier. And then, you know, we started that next season off with some really nice babies, and just the luck continued. 2 more Breeders' Cups, an Eclipse Award. We're going to Ascot. Hopefully going to Ascot. We're nominated with 2. I have one with Jesse Harrington in Ireland, in Rushing Fall. And then, you know, we were at the Derby, which, you know, year 3 is something to be said. And, you know, it's a testament to, you know, my whole team of people, the Stone Street team where all the horses get broke, my partner Barbara, and just it's kind of a magical kind of scenario for a new owner.
When you mentioned Coolmore, your Stone Street's involved with Good Magic, Sire Curlin, of course. You're out here, you mentioned the backside, helping give you the buzz back here, of course, second to none Derby week. What has this scene been like in particular with all those other successes you've had, and what would it mean to actually get the job done on Saturday?
You know, it kind of gives me goosebumps to think of it. You know, just watching the footage. You guys had the old, you know, Derby footage as we're coming into the intro, and it's just, you know, seeing guys hold the trophy, seeing the horses run. You kind of get goosebumps. I mean, I still do every time I watch one of those Breeders' Cup races, even the Bluegrass. You know, when the horse makes the move, and you know, knowing when Jose was going into the first turn, he was loaded. I mean, he was loaded, and I'm hoping to see that same thing here, you know, on Saturday.
One more quick question for you, because we're going to move forward. We've got the Oaks and Derby training, a lot of stuff coming up, but some really good stuff with Bob. The dam is Glinda the Good Witch of the South, and the Wizard of Oz. Is that kind of how Good Magic got his name?
Yeah, we went back and forth. Barbara's camp and our small camp kind of went through a list of names and kind of it just worked out well, and we kind of like Good Magic, and it stuck. And everybody kind of the name is bad, or everybody's got an opinion, but until the DRF said Good Magic makes Bolt d'Oro disappear in the Breeders' Cup, the name really didn't stick.
Now, it seems like all these great horses have and I'm blanking on what Secretariat's name almost was, but what was the runner-up to Good Magic?
I don't believe there really was one. There's a lot of good and a lot of magics, kind of just magical names in there, and that just kind of seemed like a proper name for the horse.
Yeah.
Last question before we let you go, Bob. You've kind of alluded to it already, but tell the viewers out there, somebody that is maybe thinking about getting into the business, what it's like to own racehorses, that feeling of watching them develop and watching them go into the starting gate and watching them eventually win, kind of capsulize what that's like.
There's nothing like it in the world. A minute 30, 2 minutes coming up here, the adrenaline spike that you get when your horse is in any race. It doesn't matter if it's a claiming race, if it's a maiden, if it's the big day. The whole spike of the adrenaline you get is phenomenal. Watching this unbelievable athlete that you've seen come from a farm to becoming a baby, to seeing broke as a 2-year-old, and to win a race, as you guys know, the feeling is just there's nothing like it.
I don't know, but I've cashed some tickets, and that's probably the next tier down. Next up on my list is winning one for sure. So great testimonial.
It's great to have you in the game. You're a great spokesperson and ambassador, and we wish you the best of luck in the Kentucky Derby and with all your horses.
Thank you. And I love the sport. I love being around this, and I think the sport is underserved as far as the public, knowledge of the sport. ESPN, hook us up. Love be great for us, but thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
That's what good ambassadors do. Thanks, Bob. All right, so we've got people watching from across the world, everybody. We're going to get to some social media questions. We've got Jada from Ohio. We've got Sherwin from Texas. We've got James from Ireland, all across North America, all across the world. We've got people joining us as well. Dawn at the Downs, right here at Churchill Downs. We want your questions. Every question is a good question. We'll be back with social media questions and live training on the Kentucky Derby Work Show right after this.
Feel the excitement with TwinSpires.com, the official betting partner of the Kentucky Derby and Breeders' Cup. With TwinSpires.com, place legal wagers and watch live horse racing wherever you are on any device. Sign up, play, and win today. New players use promo code WIN100 on sign up to start your $100 bonus. With TwinSpires.com, you can bet the Kentucky Derby. Get the TwinSpires.com app to receive special offers and the most up-to-date information. Terms and conditions apply. Void where prohibited. Please wager responsibly.
Where the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. It's summer, the people are gay. The corn tops ripe and the fields are all in bloom, and the bird music all.
Today, we share the best of Kentucky. It's our Woodford way.
Welcome back to the Kentucky Derby Morning Workout Show presented by TwinSpires.com. It's Wednesday of Derby Week. The Oaks has been drawn, so is the Derby. We'll talk more about that as we move forward. But again, social media questions from all over the world. And we're going to get to those and keep asking them, keep popping them in. Ed DeRosa and I here on the backstretch. And we've got a social media question, and we're going to throw that to the third and fourth members of our team, James Scully and Brandon Staubel. They're high atop Churchill Downs. And guys, from Jennifer on Facebook, we'll start with this one. How many of the horses do you think are in their best form going into the Kentucky Derby? I know what my answer is. Curious to see what you guys say.
Oh, good morning, fellas. Yes, I would say that most of them. I mean, there's none. I mean, maybe the biggest of long shots, a couple of those horses might not be in their top form, but for the most part, the overwhelming majority of the horses in the Kentucky Derby field are in top form, Brandon.
Yeah, this is such a deep field, and we talked about 15, 20 years from now, we're going to look back at this field and say, wow, this was a great field. So a lot of good horses coming in here, guys, and expecting a big performance from a lot of stars.
Just a moment here. I want to get Ed's opinion on this horse, on that question as well. And Ed, I think, is from my opinion, these horses might all be in their best form, like they're coming into this race on the top of their respective games, but how do they sort themselves out based on talent and everything else that's involved?
Right. I think you look at old charts of derbies and replays, and you definitely could say some don't run their race. So for that reason, I might go a little lower than if James had given a number. It sounds like he might think 16 or 18 of the 20. I would say it's maybe closer to a dozen. Not every horse is going to run the race, and it's the Derby, and we know horsemen want to be here, and they're going to run. So I think 12 will run the race, and only one will be good enough for the Roses. But I agree. I think 12 is a big number for that. It's a competitive group. It's going to be a great race.
Yeah, I mean, a horse like Good Magic, who's I think 12-1 in the morning line, would potentially be the favorite in a lot of years.
I mean, Bolt d'Oro for sure. Travis and I were talking about this. If he had gone to the Arkansas Derby and won, let's assuming he ran the same speed rating he did Santa Anita Derby, he'd be comfortably the second choice here, and it'd be a justified Bolt showdown. But he stayed home, faced the favorite now, and he's not. So, yeah, makes it a very compelling race.
All right, so Dawn at the Downs, a lot of people eating breakfast right now. There are some people out on the balcony enjoying what is an absolutely beautiful morning here under the Twin Spires. Let's get a question from Dawn at the Downs. This is from Kermit, and I think he must be from New York because he wants to know, and we'll send this one to James, why nobody is talking about Enticed, why nobody is talking about Firenze Fire. They're the two of the horses from New York who have been dancing, in the Big Apple and have had some pretty good results. James?
Well, both horses are a little bit of a concern with the mile and a quarter distance, that's for sure. Firenze Fire has recorded all of his wins at a one-turn distance. I will say Entice is being a little overlooked considering he won the Kentucky Jockey Club here last November. But he's run 3 times this year, Brandon. Ran 4th and ran 2nd, and then his lone win came in a one-turn mile. So a little bit of a concern that the mile and a quarter distance might not be a good fit for both horses in my estimation.
Yeah, he made a great appearance. He actually came out after the break, the special renovation break yesterday, and it looked great in the flesh, galloped, and, there was nothing to knock on the horse, guys.
All right, so we'll get to more social media questions during the course of the show. We've got Hall of Fame jockey Chris McCarron joining us, and Chris is going to be with us through the works portion, and he's going to be here to answer some questions as well. So if you have any questions for Chris McCarron jockey related, that would be a good time to pump those in during the second half of our show. And let's take a look at the Kentucky Oaks draw. The Oaks will be run on Friday. The Longines Kentucky Oaks, 14 horses in this race versus 20 for the Derby, and we've got Brad Cox with the 2-1 morning line favorite in Monomoy Girl. I don't think that post position is going to bother her. Want to get your thoughts. And Midnight Bisou, the clear second choice, coming in from California. She's a stalker or a closer, and she's 5-2.
Yeah, Monomoy Girl from the 14 might lose ground. I mean, that is on the outside. I think the benefit, though, is Coach Rock's way down inside. Florent Giroux is going to have a great view of what's transpiring to his inside and maybe in front of him. I know Brad doesn't want to go gate to wire as she did in the Ashland. So, yeah, 14 is a ground loss concern, but from planning the best trip, I don't hate it. Florent Giroux, coincidentally, in post 19 for the Kentucky Derby with Noble Indy, so he's going to get an unfortunate good view of that outside rail in both races. But Monomoy Girl, I think she'll drift up from 2-1 because of the outside post. Midnight Bisou, the other horse to beat. Very competitive. That Oaks Derby double should pay handsomely because I'm against the favorite in the Derby.
Yeah, I don't think the post is going to affect Monomoy Girl as far as the outside gate goes. Sometimes horses break outward when they're in that outside gate because they don't have a horse to the outside of them, so she might get off to a little bit of a sluggish start. I want to talk to James and Brandon about this. There's not a lot of speed in the Oaks. I mean, Classy Act has got speed. She's going to go. A couple of others with tactical speed. But I think if Florent just breaks cleanly and Monomoy Girl shows her natural speed in and out of that first turn, I think she's going to be in a perfect position.
Yeah, a little bit of the wild card there, Joe, is what happens with Take Charge Paula. We referenced that yesterday. She's adding blinkers. She's shown good speed in her start. She's going to be in post 9. But you're right about I agree with your take on Monomoy Girl's post. Brad Cox did not want to go wire to wire. He didn't want her on the lead. He wants to set right off it. Post 14 should help her in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where we've got a couple of wild cards here with the pace scenario. We've got Coach Rocks on the inside. I don't think they want to get shuffled back in here, and the horse has won wire to wire before, has a little tactical foot, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do. And then you've got Take Charge Paula, like we just talked about, putting the blinkers on. So possibility, Monomoy Girl could be 3 to 4 wide in the first turn. Not exactly sure that's where she wants to be, but Joe, you're right. Her speed can help her take advantage of that if she breaks clean.
All right, we've got more social media questions coming in. A couple of them are about jockeys. I'm going to save those for Chris McCarron. He can answer them better than we can.
Good thinking.
We're going to talk about Vino Rosso. Sherry from Facebook is a little concerned with Vino Rosso's post position number 18. Ed, we'll start with you. He's kind of a little bit more of an off-the-pace type, and it's a little bit of a tricky post for him because even if he is in that stalking position, there could be a few stalkers stacked up going into that first turn.
Yeah, definitely. Again, similar to Monomoy Girl, the ground loss concern, but unlike Monomoy Girl, unlikely to be as forwardly placed. So now you have trouble and horses coming back to you in play. It's not great, but he does have Johnny V, who's won the race twice. Animal Kingdom came from a little further off of it than Always Dreaming did, so he's had experience with both styles. At the price, I don't think you can let it talk you off him. I mean, if he were really taking money 6 or 8 to 1, you'd say, well, that's a tough price on a tough post. But given I think he'll be at least 12 to 1, it's okay. Like, you don't love it, but it's not enough to talk you off him.
All right, we're going to get one more social media question in here. I'm going to throw this up to James and Brandon. We're going to answer it, and then I'm going to ask it to Chris because there's 2 different perspectives. We've got Curtis, and he is at Dawn at the Downs. He says, when handicapping a race, how important a factor is the jockey in the equation? To me, it's horse racing, not jockey racing, and we've got the best jockeys in the world here. But some of them handle adversity better than others, guys.
Yeah, definitely. It is. I agree. The horses are the most important thing, their form, but you have to pay attention to hot and cold jockeys. I mean, hot jockeys will just ride with confidence and perform at a high level. Cold jockeys are best to be avoided from a handicapping perspective, Brandon.
Yeah, we were just talking about this before we came on air, but certain jockeys do better in certain situations. So let's say on a closer, on a speed horse, a guy like Javier Castellano, he's very good on the lead. He's got a great clock in his head. And then other guys, like a Corey Lannery, they're very good at finishing, especially down on the rail. So for me, it's more about the situation.
Yeah, I agree, Brandon. I think the situational handicapping with jockeys is more important than just who the jockey is. For an example, with the Kentucky Derby, we talked about Corey Lannery getting on Promises Fulfilled. Some thought Robbie Alvarado is the better gate rider, so for the pace setter, you'd say, oh, why didn't Robbie take Promises Fulfilled? But Free Drop Billy may be the better chance, so definitely situational handicapping when it comes to jockeys, especially with turf sprints becoming more in vogue. Certainly some excel at that better than others. To me, it's all about the variables of the race, not the jockey.
All right, so Ed, myself, James, and Brandon are all lucky enough to be here at Churchill Downs for the Kentucky Derby. We realize everybody can't get here, but you can still throw a party. You can still have a blast watching the Kentucky Derby with your friends. And if you're planning to watch the Kentucky Derby from home, visit KentuckyDerbyParty.com for information on where to watch, betting tips, recipes, and a chance to win a trip to next year's Kentucky Derby. It's home Derby party information that you definitely want to take advantage of. KentuckyDerbyParty.com. We'll be right back with jockey Chris McCarron, Hall of Fame rider, now retired, but he's got a lot of great insight right after this.
Feel the excitement with TwinSpires.com, the official betting partner of the Kentucky Derby and Breeders' Cup. With TwinSpires.com, place legal wagers and watch live horse racing wherever you are on any device. Sign up, play, and win today. New players use promo code WIN100 on sign up to start your $100 bonus. With TwinSpires.com, you can bet the Kentucky Derby. Get the TwinSpires.com app to receive special offers and the most up-to-date information. Terms and conditions apply. Void where prohibited. Please wager responsibly.
Where the sun shines bright on my old Kentucky home. It's summer, the people are gay. The corn tops ripe and the fields are all in bloom, and the bird music all the day.
Today, we share the best of Kentucky. It's our Woodford way.
We are back on the Kentucky Derby Morning Work Show presented by TwinSpires.com, and you can see it in that shot. There are a lot of people here, a lot of news reporters, TV, radio. It is Derby week. It is on, and as you can see, temperature hovering around 70 degrees, an absolutely gorgeous morning here under the Twin Spires. Main track is fast for Kentucky Derby training time, Oaks training time, 7:30 to 7:45. Eastern Daylight Time, and you see an empty chair between us right now. Chris McCarron is here. He'll be here momentarily.
Need to give him a leg up on that chair.
We need to give him a leg up. I think maybe he wore the wrong silks or something. He had to go back to the color room and change it.
China Horse Club was here auditing his silks.
We got a social media question to fill a little bit of time that we're going to throw up to James and Brandon, and it's from Jen on Facebook. And she wants to know about post positions in the Kentucky Derby. Bob Baffert has 7 with Justify. He actually, at some point, I believe Jen says, wanted post position number 16, would have been his preference. Is there an advantage or a disadvantage to being in a middle gate in the Kentucky Derby with 20 horses, guys?
Well, one thing about Justify is he's a big, long-striding horse, and he's never had horses on his outside. So theoretically, Bob Baffert would have preferred an outside post because he would have been able to stay in the clear on the outside the entire way. But still, as it is in the starting gate, there's speed. The real speed in the race appears to be to his inside in the starting gate. So he just might be fast enough that he really doesn't have any horses outside him during the early stages, Brandon.
Yeah, it takes maybe just a little bit for him to get going, but once he gets going, it's hard to stop. But so if you break slow and you've got horses all around you, then yes, that's a problem. And he drew a good enough post. Obviously, he didn't want to be down on the inside, but for him to get his long stride going early is very important.
Okay, thanks to James and Brandon. Chris McCarron has arrived on the set. We'll give him a moment or two to get settled in. I'll take a quick social media question here. It's about Hofburg from Jerry on Facebook. He wants to know if Hofburg is a live sleeper. I know Ed DeRosa has him very highly rated. The horse as well was second best in the Florida Derby last time out behind Audible. Just 3 lifetime starts for Hofburg, but he's looked great training, and we believe that Hofburg is going to run his race. Where that fits in with the rest of the Kentucky Derby field remains to be seen. But yeah, I think he's got a good chance at a big price. Hofburg, Jerry on Facebook, we thank you for that question. Again, live Kentucky Derby and Oaks training, 7:30 in the morning. Begins in just a couple of moments from now. And we are honored to have Chris McCarron joining us here on set. Chris, Hall of Fame jockey, 2-time Kentucky Derby winner, 7,000 wins in your career. And Chris, I mentioned it yesterday that Johnny Velasquez won the Kentucky Derby last year at age 45, the second oldest jockey to do so. But we see guys like Mike Smith, Gary Stevens, a lot of the older riders are doing extremely well. You got out at 47 when you were still on top of your game with over 7,000 wins and 20% winners. Explain to the racing fans why you decided at that point, it was time to move on to something else.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on this morning. I was satiated. I got to the point where I felt that I accomplished quite a bit in my career, and I had a great deal of fun, of course. But had I known there were going to be races like Pegasus and the World Cup and, $15, $20 million in these races, I might have kept on riding. But no, in all seriousness, I was just satisfied. I got to the point where I just wanted to go on and find something else to do.
Now, if I had to guess, maybe one race that never really satiates you is the Kentucky Derby. Dwayne Lucas, with all his wins, talks about that fire to still hoist that trophy. You won twice, once in 1987 with Ali Sheba. What kind of thrill is a jockey, trainer, horseman to get it done on the first Saturday in May?
It's indescribable. It's really unbelievable. The feeling that you get when you're coming down through the lane and all of a sudden you feel like I might be able to get there. And then you get closer and closer. This race with Ali Sheba was unbelievable. He stumbled there at the head of the stretch, clipping the heels of Beth twice, and for him to be able to get up and go on by that horse was an amazing feat.
Let's talk about that. We want to see that again if we can. and just tell us what was happening, what was going through your mind, because you're like, man, I've got a horse. I can probably win this Kentucky Derby. And then you've got a little bit of adversity to overcome there. Explain exactly what happened. We're going to take a look at that video again and how it kind of played out for you.
Well, there wasn't a whole lot went through my mind, honestly. I didn't think about 17 horses behind me. I didn't think about the potential of falling. I just thought there's only one horse left to go by. Let's just keep on going here. And so I just reacted, got myself back in the saddle. I pushed my body back to get out of his way a little bit, to allow him to get back up on his feet. And he did it. He was a very agile colt. And right up here, as we straightened out for home, Bet Twice came out under left-handed whipping, and Ali Sheba clipped heels right there and stumbled. You can see I went back. My butt hit the saddle a little bit, and I regained my balance. And Ali Sheba was just such a great athlete. He was able to do it.
I think we could have seen a DQ if he wasn't able to do it.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind. Yeah, there would have been a DQ, but fortunately, we didn't have to go through that process.
Right. We always talk, like, can there ever be a DQ in the Derby? Because 20 horses roughly run, etc. We talked about the turn for home. One thing I'm interested in, you hear jockeys talk about it, and you're really the only person with this perspective. What is that wall of sound like turning for home?
Honestly, I've never. The only time I've heard it that I really thought it was noticeable is when my horse is stopping and I'm way back in the pack. But when you're up there in contention, you're so focused on getting run out of your horse that you really don't listen to it. You might hear it, but you don't listen.
Right. Do the horses notice it?
I've never experienced any type of adverse reaction from a horse, no.
Interesting.
Let's get to the horses on the track, guys. The Oaks and Derby training time has begun, and we've got Midnight Bisou. And Chris, I think it's great that you're here with us, because they've been hearing Ed, myself, James, and Brandon up by the finish line for the better part of the last 2 weeks now. We've got a fresh perspective from you. This is Midnight Bisou. She is one of the favorites for the Kentucky Oaks. What are we looking for here with just a couple of days before the Oaks and Derby to see that these horses are happy, healthy, and ready to run their best race on Friday or Saturday?
Well, you want to see them bouncing like she was. A lot of horses will come on the track and just walk very calmly, and others will be fractious and nervous. But you like to find a happy medium. You like to see a horse coming on the track in a relaxed fashion, but when it comes time to get going and do your work, you want to see some spring in her step, and she's got it. I like the way she looks right there. She's got good spring in her step. She's got her ears forward. She looks happy. When the ears go back and they're pinning their ears and keeping them back there, that means they're a little bit sulky, a little bit upset about something. But this filly is taking it all in. She's looking around, and new surroundings for her. She looks very happy.
We got lots of Oaks and Derby horses, and I thought I heard in my ear that maybe Justify is going to school in the starting gate. If that's the case, we definitely want to try to pick that up. Let's try to get around to some other horses here as you take a look at Midnight Bisou, the likely second choice, or maybe the favorite for the Kentucky Oaks. It's Monomoy Girl and her. That's what everybody's talking about.
I think she'll be favored.
There's the starting gate. There are a couple horses lingering behind the starting gate there. They look like Oaks horses, though. There's a horse in the gate. Is that Justify? We believe that is Justify. So, Chris, what's going on now? I mean, we're schooling in the gate. What is the purpose?
The purpose is twofold. You want the horse to get a chance to stand on the gate. Whenever you go to a new track, it's always beneficial for the horse's mind, the horse's attention, and you want them to be comfortable in the surroundings. You're also giving the starters, the assistant starters and the head starters, a chance to pick up notice any habits that the horse might have, any likes or dislikes. But he looked fantastic in there. He walked in there very calmly, stood calmly, backed out like he's supposed to, and now Jimmy Barnes has a hold of him. Jimmy's on the pony, and he's jogging down the track, looks very happy. I'm sure whenever a horse does that, schools that well in the gate before a huge race like this, the head starter breathes a sigh of relief for sure, especially when it's the favorite.
Your thoughts on Justify in general? I mean, Bob Baffert said he's the best looking horse I've ever trained. Bob's trained a few good ones, including 4 Derby winners. Best looking doesn't always equate to most talented or most professional and so on and so forth. But yeah, he's a beast.
He is a beast. He's gorgeous, and he's all muscled out. The muscle tone and definition is fantastic. He's on the muscle here. He's got his ears forward, but he's got a good strong hold of the exercise rider here, and the boy is really having to work to keep him under control. He puts his ears back there because he probably heard somebody chirp or probably heard something else going on the track. And when you see a horse respond like that readily to anything, and they want to pick it up and go, that means they're very eager, and he looks plenty eager to me. He looks fantastic.
Going into a big race, you've been around a lot of big horses, whether it's Derby or other Grade 1s. Is there a day of no return, so to speak, where you know this horse is locked in, or adversely, you're thinking we're not going to get there with our best shot on Saturday? Is it the work day? Is it coming out of the work? What part of the week, as trainers and jockeys, are the horse telling you, hey, I'm ready, or not?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ed. There are some horses that just absolutely do not like this racetrack. And they show you that they don't like it. As they go along, you'll see their head dip a little bit. They'll bobble. And that's because this track can be a little bit cuppy. When it's really wet, when it's nice and wet and soaking a lot of water on it, it's not cuppy. But when it's drying out and stuff like that, it gets cuppy, and the horse may not get across it as comfortably as they should. They're not getting a good foothold. And when a horse does that, you know pretty much that the horse is not handling the track, so that discourages you as far as your chances go.
This is a good juxtaposition because we've gone from an Apollo horse who didn't race at 2 and the favorite Justify to our 2-year-old champion, Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner, Good Magic. Are you an Apollo believer, and what's important to get a horse going from 2 to 3 to keep that progression going?
Well, it's been a long time since Apollo, so there's got to be something to it. But if anybody can break that long stretch of no winners without a start at 2, it's Bob Baffert, that's for sure. And he looks like he's got the colt that can do it. But Good Magic looks good here. He changes lead smoothly there. He looks good and straight. He's not leaning in or leaning out. The exercise rider has a good hold of him. He looks very comfortable getting across the track. You don't see his head bobbling at all as he's going along. One little dip right there, but not much. Even when they gallop, their head will bobble. Their head will dip a little bit. That means they're bobbling on the track. They hit a little loose spot, but he looks good going over the surface.
We are here with Hall of Fame jockey Chris McCarron giving his insights into what he's seeing on the racetrack here this morning. 2-time Kentucky Derby winner with Ali Sheba in 1987 and Gopher Gin in 1994. And there's a favorite of our television department. Our producer, Keith Wexler, says, you got to get the promises fulfilled, guys. Chris, with this horse, I mean, we pretty much know he's going to the lead, so he's a very important horse in the Kentucky Derby. When you have a horse like this and you're riding the race and you know he's probably going to go to the lead and you think he's probably going to go pretty fast, and you're on a horse that has some tactical speed and you know he's probably going to come back to the pack, talk about timing your move depending on what kind of horse you're riding. You have to ride your race, but you kind of have to ride the races of the other jockeys as well.
Well, I'll answer your question with a question first. I should know the answer to this, but which post did he draw?
3.
3. Okay, so he's inside of Justify. That's going to make Mike's job a lot easier. If he had drawn outside of Mike, then Mike would have been in a position to where he gets Justify running a little bit to make sure he's going to be in front of most of the horses, and then at some point through the stretch, allow Promises Fulfilled to cross over. He doesn't have to worry about that. Promises Fulfilled, if he gets away cleanly, shows his normal speed, he'll be in front. and Mike will be able to go ahead and stalk him in a good spot. If somebody else wants to put pressure up there on Promises Fulfilled, then Mike will have to make a decision going into the first turn as to whether or not he's going to let that happen, or if he's going to be the one that will be laying second all the way.
With an somewhat inexperienced horse like Justify, he's run against less horses in 3 races than he's going to run against on Saturday alone. Do you want to try to make your move early? Do you want to get to the lead at an early portion of the race, or kind of wait, go, and then try to hold safe? I mean, when do you say it's time to make the lead with a horse like that?
Well, before we get that far into the race, going into the first turn here, if Mike's laying second to Promises Fulfilled, he's going to be looking to his right to see what other horses are alongside of him. If they're real long shots, and it appears to Mike that the rider is letting his horse run and wants to be up close, Mike might decide to ease back from between Promises Fulfilled and another horse, but he's going to have to make that decision as he goes. But then after, let's say they go down the backside and they're in that same position, 1-2, Mike will just sit there and wait as long as he has to. He won't move a muscle until he gets some pressure from the horses that are coming from behind him.
You mentioned training over the track. Some horses don't like it. Another variable with the Kentucky Derby, of course, is the mount, a quarter distance. We saw Firenze Fire, who some wonder if he's just a one-turn horse. As a jockey, what are you looking for, trying to feel in the preps that might tell you there's an extra furlong in the tank?
The way a horse gallops out after a race and after they work, when a horse is galloping out after they race, if they're in front and then horses come to them and your horse kind of re-breaks a little bit, Ali Sheba, for instance, he used to pull himself up when he made the lead. He would wait. Once he got in front, he thought the job was over. Didn't matter if it was at the head of the stretch or down close to the wire. He used to give me heart failure. But galloping out after the race, horses would come to him and he'd re-break and just take off again. And I go, oh, you dirty, rotten son of a gun, you got a lot of gas left here, which is good. That's what you look for when you're on their back and when you're watching them as you're training them. You watch to see how they're galloping out and what do they look like after they've galloped out well. If they've galloped out strongly, do they catch their breath quickly? Do they seem like their legs are not fatigued? Does their respiratory rate recover quickly? Those are the things that you're looking for to see if you can expect a horse can get more ground.
Now, I have a very novice eye. I can't wait to hear what Brandon thinks, but looking at Hofburg, I'm pretty impressed. I'm excited to bet him at 20-1. I'll put it that way. Any thoughts there?
Well, again, this is another colt that is really on the muscle, and I think it's a great idea that Churchill Downs went 2 years ago to confine the training time to Derby and Oaks horses for just this half hour, 45 minutes. When it's crowded out there, these horses can get much more rank than they would when it's quiet with just a few horses out there at a time. So it makes training them a little bit more comfortable, and it's a little safer for them as well. But he looked terrific. Hofburg looked like he was eager, ready to go, and it looked like he was getting across the ground very well.
We continue to see horses here. This is Instilled Regard. We saw Firenze Fire. We just saw Hofburg. I'm going to throw it up to James and Brandon, and I'm sure you guys probably have a question or two for Chris about the training period, maybe some horses in particular, but let's open up the discussion to you guys. I can pass the question along to Chris, who doesn't have an IFB, but what would you guys like to ask Chris?
Go ahead, Brandon. So we talked about Hofburg just a minute ago, and he's a Tappet, obviously. Does Chris, should we read into when he was out there, certain sires getting more worked up before big races than others?
Hofburg's by Tappet. He's a little bit headstrong. Do you look into the bloodlines at all, saying, oh, this horse is a Tappet, he's going to act a certain way, or this horse is a Curlin, they're going to act a certain way? Because there is a little something to it, but is it something that you pay attention to at all, Chris?
Yeah, certainly. When I was riding, I paid attention to the bloodlines, especially if a stallion or a mare had particular habits that were very common, that they did a lot, they did all the time. For instance, a lot of the Stormcats were very, very hot horses on the track because he was a hot horse himself, and so a lot of his were excitable on the track and hard to get to settle down. The Tappets seem to be on the muscle when they're out there, and Hoffberg looked like he was as well. But yes, I do consider that. A lot of the Aladars stayed on their left lead when they were running. Aladar stayed on his left lead all the time during those Triple Crown races and in all of his races, actually. And I rode a lot of Aladars over the years that stayed on their left lead down through the stretch as well.
Interesting you mentioned Storm Caddies, for the Derby, which maybe we'll get to if we get another Scat Daddy on the screen. But here's Bolt D'Oro, and again with good magic, one of the top 2-year-olds looking to take another step forward here in the Derby, Southern California horse. Have you looked much at the regions and which one you might like best coming into this year's Derby?
Yeah, I think the company they keep is determined by the regions, the areas where they're running. When you're talking about a horse like when you're talking about a race like the Derby, the Preakness, the Belmont, our best races, you have to take into consideration the company that the horses have been keeping, and it's who beats who, and time sometimes is important, but nowhere near as much as the company they keep.
And both D'Oro second to Justify, so Santa Anita Derby looking to be a key race, Instilled Regard fourth in there. Should make it an interesting one. And I'm on the Florida Derby, though, Audible and Hofburg for me. That's the region I'm looking at.
Chris, let's talk a little bit more about Bolt, because horses can be good at age 2. And I think you kind of have to reprove yourself when you go into your 3-year-old season, because some horses, peak faster mentally and physically at an earlier age than others, which take longer to develop. We've seen Good Magic go on nicely to his 3-year-old year. To an extent, Bolt D'Oro as well. But talk about that progression from age 2 to 3, not only physically, but mentally.
Well, horses mature at different rates, and it really depends on, a lot of times it depends on their bloodline. Some horses are bred to be precocious, and other horses, because of their bloodline, take a little bit longer to mature and to get into the game both head-wise and physically. But just because a horse hasn't run at 2 or hasn't run very often at 2 doesn't mean that they're not going to go out there and prove that they can really get it done early in the season. But I'm from the old school, though. I don't want to contradict myself, but I like it when a horse has had several starts at 2, especially coming into the Derby. I like it when they have several starts that spring, too. And with Bolt D'Oro only having 2 starts, he's had 2 so far, right? That's going to be a challenge for him, and they were both hard races. And I don't think he bounced out of his. He had hard race in his first race against McKenzie, and then he didn't really bounce against Justify. But I got a feeling he's going to bounce this time. I can't see him putting 3 really good races together off of such a short preparation time.
Now, one horse that James Scully likes in the Kentucky Oaks is Eskimo Kisses. We're going to take a look at her next, I believe. James, talk a little bit about Eskimo Kisses, why you like her, and then if you have a question for Chris, I can relay it down here in the studio.
Well, Joe, with Eskimo Kisses, one of the reasons I like her is I just love her progression. I mean, she didn't break her maiden until February, took another step forward, an allowance win. Really a big effort in the Fairgrounds Oaks. She got going a little bit late in that race, missed by a head. And then I liked her move on the far turn of the Ashland. I mean, there was going to be no catch in Monomoy Girl. She was lone speed that day, but I thought it was a solid setup. Obviously, she's going to need some pace. My question, I guess, for Chris would be, is he handicapping pace? If he's handicapping pace on a late runner, will he try to sit a little bit closer if he thinks the pace is going to be moderate?
James, up by the finish line, has a question for you about the pace of the race and the Oaks and the Derby in particular. How much handicapping do you do, Chris, and how much do you look at the pace and what kind of horse you have and try to visualize the race in your mind before you go out to the track and leave the starting gate?
Well, frankly, I haven't thoroughly and deeply looked into the past performances of the fields yet. But I do a lot of homework before I go out and ride, especially races like this. I I need to know, first of all, what style of running my horse has. If my horse is a come from behind horse, the next thing I'm going to look for is how much pace, how much speed is in the race. If I see there's 3 or 4 speed horses in the race, I'm going to be feeling good about the fact that there's going to be a good, honest, fast pace up in front of me. Conversely, if there isn't much pace and I'm on a come from behind her, I might let the horse lay a little bit closer than he's been laying in the past, expecting that there may be a slow pace up in front of me. So yeah, James, I do a lot of homework. If I was a handicapper, I would be known as a trip handicapper, because I always tried to put my horse in the position where I thought would best suit his chances to win.
We saw Flame Away in the Gate. We see Solomini here. We've got a question on social media that's perfect for what we've been looking at, and it talks about the gate. And Mike from Dawn at the Downs, Chris, asks, do some horses just not like the gate? You'll see horses sometimes before the start of a race balk at the starting gate a little bit. Obviously, the break in the Kentucky Derby is very important. Sometimes what happens out of the gate is out of your control. But how important is gate schooling, and how important is it for a horse to have their manners in the gate?
Well, gate schooling is the reason, I should say, good behavior in the gate is the reason for gate schooling. And the reason for good behavior in the gate is to get away well. The last thing you want to have happen in the Derby or the Oaks or big fields like this is to get away poorly, especially if you're on a speed horse. So it's important to have the horse comfortable in the gate. The reason that a lot of them don't want to go in is because they feel a little bit claustrophobic when they're in there. You're in there in a very tight confinement. There's not a lot of room, and you've got a couple of men up alongside your heads, one on the right, one on the left, and it can be a little bit disturbing for a horse at times. So you want the horse to be used to the gate. You want him to be unafraid of the gate, and so that he'll stand well and be alert and be looking down the track when the gates open up.
Do they notice a different view, or for the horse, is it the metal gates close and that's it? Or in a race like this, can a horse sense, there's a lot more open space, there's big run to the turn, all those different things that a mile and a quarter race they've never encountered before? Is there a difference there, and is that why the gate is here where it is here for that schooling purpose, or for the horse it's just they know they're in the gate and that's that?
Well, they've got the gate over there in that sort of semi-chute because of space on the track here. They don't have any room to have a straight chute like we do at Santa Anita or a lot of other mile tracks. You'd have that straight quarter chute. So it's basically for safety and lack of space out there for the positioning of this starting gate for schooling. But I love it when I'm on a speed horse going a mile and a quarter or any long distance, and a horse comes out of there running, and all of a sudden you got a long run to the first turn. All of a sudden the horse just throws his ears up because there is a lot of open space out in front of him. And when a horse does that, I just drop my hands on him and leave him alone and let him rate himself. So the long run to the first turn can give a horse an opportunity to relax as they're going by the stands the first time.
The other day we saw Lone Sailor. It was more than a week ago now. Work in company, had 2 targets. He's a deep closer as his style, and he went really fast, Chris. He went 57 seconds flat, which we don't see very often in workouts to begin with, let alone leading up to the Kentucky Derby. But he bounced out of it great. When you are on a horse again or worked a horse, obviously it's important for them to bounce out of that work well. What kind of signs are you looking for to tell you that, hey, that was a fast workout, but it still worked in our favor potentially?
Well, you never know until afterwards. I'm sure if that's what they wanted, then they've got to be pleased with it. But if they wanted him to go in, a minute or 101 or something like that, that's probably not in his best interest. But you really never know until after the fact. Got a funny story for you. Years ago, I was riding a nice horse called Precisionist, very fast horse, and I was breezing him 3/4 of a mile a week before the Santa Anita Handicap. And Ross Fenstermaker told me he wanted a really good work in him. And I said, "What kind of time are you looking for?" He said, "I'd like to see him go in 111." I said, okay, great. Well, go over there. I worked him. He worked fantastic. He worked in 9-2. And Ross was not too happy when I was pulling up after the work. And I said, well, what did he go in? He said 9-2. I said, well, 9-2 was 11. You told me to go in 11. He wasn't laughing too much.
That is awesome. Horses are leaving the track here. There you see Derby Bob Baffert with 4 Kentucky Derby wins under his belt, and he's the morning line favorite to get his 5th. And we've got some social media questions coming in, Chris. A lot of them are specifically for you. And the way you've talked about Justify here during the course of the last half hour or so, I got a feeling I know the answer to this already, but people want your Derby pick. Are you willing to give one?
Yeah, sure. I think the best horse in the race is Justified. If my agent were to come to me and say, who would you like to ride out of these 20 colts, it would be Justify. But if I was gambling on the race, I think I'd probably go with Audible. I really liked his Florida Derby. A little surprised that Johnny chose, I assumed Johnny had a choice between Vino Rosso and Audible, and he went with Vino Rosso. So that tells you something about Vino Rosso's chances. Nonetheless, I like Audible, and I'm not exactly sure the jockey situation with Boltioro and Audible, if Javier actually took off Boltioro to ride Audible. If he did, that's a very good sign.
That was from Vince on Facebook. And this man next to you, as you can tell by his button, Chris.
Yeah, how about that? Yeah.
No, as I said, I'm a believer in the Florida Derby form. We got a shot at Dawn's at the Down. A lot of great people there. I want to say hello to Leanne from Cleveland. Big Indians fan I know is up there, so I promised her a shout-out. Go Tribe.
You always got to sneak. That was a good way for you to sneak into your Cleveland, Ohio reference. We answered this as handicappers earlier, Chris, about the jockey factor and how much we look at who the jockeys are when we're handicapping a race. Obviously, here in the Kentucky Derby, you've got 20 great jockeys. But for the racing fans out there, even if it's an everyday $10,000 claiming race, how much stock should they put in who's riding and when they're making their final decisions on who to bet on?
Well, I tell you, on a day like this or a day like the Breeders' Cup, you've got some of the best riders, if not the best riders in the world. And so all these jockeys are so incredibly talented that I wouldn't necessarily factor in the jockey who's riding whom situation. I would go with the form of the horse, who I like the best as far as the way they've been running, who they've been running against, what kind of track it is, whether it's a fast track, muddy track, or whatever. But all these jockeys are so talented. They're so close. It's closely matched as far as their ability goes. It's hard to separate them. So I wouldn't use that.
Marjorie from Dawn at the Downs wants to know who your favorite jockey is right now. If you were an agent, you could take somebody's book. There's some older riders that are very good. We talked about Mike Smith and Johnny Velasquez. The Ortiz brothers are very good. Javier Castellano, multiple Eclipse Award winning rider. Who would you want to ride your horse? Who's your favorite jockey? Whose book would you take? What riders do you gravitate to that are still in the game today?
Boy, that's putting me on the spot, isn't it? Huh?
Thanks, Marjorie.
I got to walk in that jocks room on Saturday just to say hello to everybody, for crying out loud. That's a difficult question to answer. All the jockeys here, I would be happy to work for any of them. They all have tremendous work ethics. They're very, very talented, obviously, and they work hard, and they deserve all the opportunities that they get.
You see some of these younger riders coming up and some of the veteran riders. Chris McCarron at age 19 when you first started riding versus Chris McCarron at age 40, 47 when you retired. Was there a big difference in how good you were?
I was a better rider when I retired than I was when I had the bug. Yeah, for sure. The old adage, if I only knew then, you know what I know now. I won 546 races my first year, and it just kind of happened. I got on a tremendous amount of live horses, and they just ran well for me. And but I wasn't using a whole lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. I was just out there riding, and it was happening. But later on in my career, I learned how to be a strategist. I learned from Bill Shoemaker, Lafitte Pinkai, Sandy Hawley, Darryl McCarg, all the really top riders out on the West Coast back in the late 70s. And I always say that, when I was riding in Maryland, I was in community college, and when I went to Southern California, I went to Harvard.
Boston guy right here. Okay, we're going to quickly get final thoughts. We've only got about a minute and a half left in the show. Throw it up to James and Brandon for your final thoughts. We'll get Chris's final thought and Ed's, and then we'll wrap it up for the day. James and Brandon.
All right, guys. Yeah, Justify made another good appearance on the track. Looked cool, calm, collected, great flesh. What we saw a little bit more today from Boldoro, he was just really jogging yesterday, the spirited gallop today. Any thoughts on what you saw?
Yeah, a little interesting. The Pletcher runners and Good Magic didn't do as much as they did yesterday, so we'll follow up on that tomorrow, see what they do. Justify did a lot more today with stretching the legs, a bit of a more faster pace today. Hofberg, again, looks fantastic. Bolt d'Oro didn't do a whole lot walking out, but then he did stretch out a little better later on. So it's good to see these guys, especially from California, start to stretch their legs a little more, guys.
And one other question, Midnight Bisou. We saw her for the first time today, main top Oaks contender. What did you think?
Yeah, looked good out there. You can tell they didn't want to do a whole lot. The major preparations are done, but like Chris said earlier, taking everything in, the ears were forward, and seemed to be a happy camper out there.
All right, thanks to James and Brandon. Chris, you got a chance to see via video some of the horses trained. You've been here last few days watching them train as well. Who has impressed you the most as we get your final thoughts here on the Wednesday of Derby week?
Everything I saw this morning looked impressive. I like the way that they're all training, actually. I can't throw anybody out as far as the way they look. But I also have an announcement to make. I just took a job with Team Valor International, one of the most successful racing syndicates in the history of the sport. So I'm excited to announce that I'm going to be working for them, trying to bring new owners into the business.
Yeah, we got that press release actually this morning when Ed told me that you were going to be a guest. I'm like, good timing, Team Valor. They've won a Kentucky Derby with Animal Kingdom. You're a great ambassador for the sport. Good hire, Team Valor.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks.
Chris, now a colleague to a former colleague of mine, Jeff Lowe, who I enjoy working with, and he's wearing an Indians cap, so it's Indians Day on the set. This is my last day here. I won't be here tomorrow, so as you noted, though, Audible is my pick. You got to have a pick. We've been doing this for a week and a half. I'm going with Todd Pletcher in the Derby.
Well, Chris, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you giving us all the time. The fans appreciate you answering their questions. Enjoy the rest of your Derby week, and congratulations on your new job. Best of luck with Team Valor.
Thank you so much, and good luck to everybody out there.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for another edition of the Kentucky Derby Work Show presented by TwinSpires.com. We all get to see Mendelssohn tomorrow for the first time. Looking very forward to that. First post today at Churchill Downs will be at 12:45. Again, thanks for joining us. It's Derby week. Oaks on Friday, Derby on Saturday.